What's up, guys? Today we're going to be breaking down our favorite characters in all of American Horror Story. And while this list started as the top 10, as I got into it and started looking at some of the characters throughout the series, I couldn't help but make it the top 15. So with all that being said, let's jump right into it. Coming in at number 15, we have Trevor Kirchner, played by Matthew Morrison in American Horror Story 1984, Season 9. In terms of qualities of a character, let's just say that Trevor has one of the biggest standouts from any character that we've met throughout the entire series. A fact which is so eloquently introduced with the idea that he worked on an early version of the Jane Fonda workout video that was very popular in the 80s. For me, every single time that he was on screen, Morrison just screamed charisma. And if it wasn't for Cody Fern in that exact same season, I would say that he was by far and away the biggest standout. And before anyone jumps at me in the comments, this is going to be the only person that comes from that season. I know that there was a lot of great standouts from season 9, but for me, Trevor, since his introduction in the very first episode, just won me over. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to see Matthew Morrison return for future seasons of this show. For anyone who doesn't know, this was actually his first season in American Horror Story. He got his start working with Ryan Murphy in Glee that aired on Fox, and a character that he made all of his own. But given his performance in 1984, I feel like there's a lot more left for him to do, and certain characters that we would love to see him play. Next up, I would really like to see him play something a little bit more serious than Trevor, but that's yet to be seen. All in all, I know the fan base is kind of split on 1984 and whether or not it is a decent season or not, but I think we can all agree that Trevor is probably one of the best things that's happened in American Horror Story character-wise in the last couple of years. Number 14, Alison Mae Richards, Sarah Paulson, American Horror Story Cult, Season 7. Look, I think at this point a lot of people are going to start going down to the comment section below and starting to crucify me for my picks already, and we're not even that far into this list, but I would have to ask, what is the best thing about American Horror Story Cult? As I already talked about in my rankings video for every single season of the show, when it comes to that season, the quality is a bit of a roller coaster. It has some great episodes and it has some of the worst in the entire series, but when it comes to the characters that were introduced, you cannot go very much further, at least in my opinion and the opinion of this list, in finding a character that is as well developed and interesting as Allie from Cult. Not only is she one of the most high-profile LGBTQ characters in all of American Horror Story, but her persistent problems and overcoming of all of her different phobias throughout the entire season makes her more relatable and realistic than almost every other character that we've met in the 9-season run of this television show. And not only that, but taking the entire season to not only lay out her fears and see how she overcomes them in order to be a brand new person by the end of the series is, at least for me, a genuine pleasure and one of the reasons that I enjoy going back to the entire season. Probably one of the reasons it ranked as high as it did on my season's rank. Number 13, and surely not the only Montgomery on this list, Nora Montgomery, played by Lily Rabe in American Horror Story Murder House, Season 1. And honestly, we can't even lie, this isn't even the only time that Lily Rabe is going to show up on this list, but I felt like she was worth putting on here because she was the inspiration for one of, if not the most iconic location in all of American Horror Story mythology, that being Murder House. Given the fact that her husband, Charles Montgomery, was the one who built the house and modeled the glass fixtures after her blue eyes. For me, Nora's character was always such an interesting exploration into a person who is more fascinated with the concept of luxury and wealth than the idea of figuring out how to fight for it. That's why she couldn't take care of her baby, and while we've even had Moira telling Vivian that she has not a single motherly bone in her body. And if I'm being honest, the only reason that her character has made it onto this list is because I've gone back and watched every season of American Horror Story multiple times. I don't feel like she stood out when I was watching it week to week when it was airing brand new, but seeing Lily Rabe come in and absolutely kill it season after season in this show, despite the few that she hasn't appeared in, has really endeared me to her characters. And honestly, that's why I've gone back and I feel like she's way more important and way more interesting than she was when I first saw her in this season. And I'm not even sure I'm the only one who thinks that way. I think a lot of characters on this list will fit that criteria, and I want everyone to go down to the comment section and tell me if anyone on this list or anyone that I missed on this list fit that criteria for you. Number 12, Elizabeth, aka the Countess, played by Lady Gaga in American Horror Story Hotel, Season 5. Look, I think this is pretty simple. I've made it no question as to how I feel about American Horror Story Hotel, and I feel like it's one of the worst seasons in a show that I love with all of my heart. I love every single season, but if I had to pick, as I did earlier, yes, it is one of the weaker seasons, but in terms of some of the characters that it introduced, some of them were the strongest that we've ever seen. And Lady Gaga's The Countess really does fit that bill. She's one of the reasons I tuned in, and I'm sure a lot of people who either got into it around season 5 or were even longtime fans since Murder House first aired really started paying attention again because Lady Gaga was going to be in this season and was going to be able to play her most endearing type of self, with a character that's just as weird and lavish and almost downright creepy as she is in real life. And that's honestly one of, if not the biggest reason she makes it on this list. American Horror Story has had a lot of different characters over the years, but when it comes to Lady Gaga's portrayal of the Countess in Hotel, it's just too much and too big to simply ignore. At the end of the day, you remember it not only because it was good, but also it was weird even for American Horror Story standards, and that makes it good enough to be on this list. Number 11, Lana Winters, played by Sarah Paulson in American Horror Story Asylum, Season 2. Okay, so before we get into any more people on this list, I just have to prime everyone who's listening. Again, as I said multiple times at the beginning, I feel like my list is going to be very controversial, but that's why we make lists and why we put our opinions out there. At the end of the day, I don't want my list to be exactly like your list because I know we have different opinions. But with that being said, this is the last entry for Sarah Paulson. I feel like I made as much clear as I put recently on my community tab whether or not Sarah Paulson does play the most memorable character in any season that she appears in American Horror Story. And honestly, while most of y'all said that she does, I just don't feel the same way. Yes, she stands out. Yes, she's good enough to be memorable. And yes, she's one of the founding mothers of the entire series. But when it comes to sheer character performances from various actors throughout the entire series, I don't feel like she holds a candle to the top 10 on this list. And I feel like one of the reasons I did have to make it a top 15 is that she would simply have to appear once. You cannot have a list of characters that were the best on American Horror Story without giving at least a few examples of Sarah Paulson, but I couldn't honestly put her in the top 10. With all of that being said, when you're looking at a season as powerful as Asylum, even being the actor portraying the third best character, at least in my opinion, is praise enough. And when it comes to the vast majority of characters throughout this entire series, very few can hold a candle to Lana Winters. Sarah Paulson approached this role with so much strength and outward energy, from that the moment she was put on screen, you knew that her story was the most worthy of being followed and putting her in the protagonist spot. And this is after Murder House, where, at least if you ask me, she didn't play the biggest of roles compared to the Harmon family or anyone in the Langdon family. And even though she was picked to be the main focal point character, American Horror Story has always been an ensemble piece, and it depends on everyone else performing. That's why, as you see on this list, you're going to see a lot of side characters who are able to shine in whatever they got when they didn't have to lead the narrative throughout the season. But when it comes to Sarah Paulson as Lana Winters, she absolutely carries the season on her back. And I honestly feel like that's one of the reasons Asylum is as good as it is, and it definitely makes my number 1 in terms of ranking all of the different seasons. Because as the creative team is focusing on so many characters, it's hard to give everyone a proper send-off, especially the main character of the entire season that they're telling you to focus on. But when it comes to American Horror Story Asylum and Lana's character, it just flowed, it felt right, and it felt earned after everything that happened in the season, and a lot of that can be attributed to Sarah Paulson and her portrayal of the character. So just before we move on, I want to make sure everyone knows that I am not trying to spit on Sarah Paulson here. I obviously love her in this series, and I hope that she comes back sometime in the future. I just feel like the top 10 are more worthy of being in the top 10 than any of the characters that she's portrayed throughout the series. Number 10, Agnes Mae Winstead, aka The Butcher, played by Kathy Bates in American Horror Story Roanoke, Season 6. I can't be the only one who thinks that Kathy Bates just had the most fun with this role. American Horror Story is no stranger to one actor playing multiple different characters, even in the midst of one particular season, but when you think about one of the actors who fully embodied the role that they're trying to play, especially when you're trying to focus on people who aren't really the central focus of any season, Kathy Bates comes to mind. She's always been an interesting standout in any season ever since she premiered in Coven, but the unique style and twists and turns of Roanoke allowed for Kathy Bates to fully embody the character of the Butcher, even going as far as showing her utter obsession with the character through her persona as Agnes and how the two started to merge throughout the season. Roanoke might not be my favorite season out of the entire series, but this is definitely a character worthy of the top 10. Number 9, Madison Montgomery, played by Emma Roberts in American Horror Story Coven and Apocalypse, Season 3 and 8 respectively. Before I get into why Madison Montgomery deserves to be on this list, I wanted to take just a couple of seconds to talk about 1984 and her portrayal of Brooke. One of the things I saw and I thought was fairly strange about this last season is that a lot of fans were seemingly pointing at Emma Roberts and saying that Brooke was her most likable character in the entire show. And while I honestly couldn't disagree with that, I feel like one of the charms with Emma Roberts and her acting persona is that you're not really supposed to like her. And by that I honestly just mean the characters that she plays. But for me, that's exactly why Madison Montgomery deserves to be on this list. And if you were even focused just on pure entertainment value alone, she would surely make the top 5. And for me, the interactions between Emma Roberts and Jessica Lange during the events of Coven is by far one of the biggest standouts of that season. And just as I said about Sarah Paulson, not to get anyone's hopes up, but this is the only time Emma Roberts is going to be on this list. But it's not without a lot of praise. This was the role I think she was born to play. And if Ryan Murphy is telling the truth about the Coven Witches coming back sometime in the future, whether it's in another season or some kind of spinoff, she definitely needs to be one of the people who's front and center in that project. Number 8, Tate Langdon, played by Evan Peters in American Horror Story Murder House and Apocalypse Seasons 1 and 8. For me, one of the reasons I've always been a fan of Tate's character is that when American Horror Story first started airing, as I've said before, nobody, or at least the people like me who weren't following that much attention to it, thought it was going to be an anthology series. And the fast-paced nature of that first season really hammered home the idea of twists and turns, with Tate's character being one of, if not the biggest centerpiece of that entire chaotic first season. He's poetic, he's passionate, he's crazy, he's a murderer, he's a mother's boy, and he's fiercely independent. And it seemed like just every single episode taught us something brand new about the character. And not to mention, even one of his most defining acts as a character is something that they probably would never even show on television again these days. It's actually a little bit sad considering what they did with American Horror Story Apocalypse, but that's more of a failure of the story in the 8th season than it is a stain on his character. Honestly, while it might be a lot of my nostalgia driving Tate's position on this list, I also have to admit that Tate's one of the only reasons that I really enjoy going back and watching Murder House to begin with. So at least to me, that makes it worthy of being in the top 10. Number 7, Sister Jude, played by Jessica Lange in American Horror Story Asylum Season 2. Before she became a Sister of the Cloth, Judy Martin was a promiscuous nightclub singer that suffered from alcoholism and was involved in a few hit-and-run accidents. Throughout the history of American Horror Story, Sister Jude probably has, out of all the characters, the most depressing backstory, but her strength and resilience, and at the beginning, her downright antagonistic behavior to everyone in the asylum just makes you hate her. But at the same time, Jessica Lange portrays the character with such grace that you just respect her as well. As I already said, if Sarah Paulson's Lana Winters was the pilot that helped guide this season forward into being the best in the entire series, then Jessica Lange's Sister Jude was her co-pilot the entire time. Through all the twists and turns of Asylum, each new episode gave Sister Jude something to do, as we learn more about who she was before she made her way to Briarcliff. And Jessica Lange's portrayal of the role, starting out as somebody that we saw as a villain that needed to be overcome at the beginning of the season, ended up becoming one of the people that we were rooting for by its end. It's an amazing character portrayal, and if Constance Langdon's character didn't get you obsessed with Jessica Lange as an actress, then this one surely did. And that's why she makes it within the top 10. Number 6, Michael Langdon, played by Cody Fern in American Horror Story Apocalypse Season 8. Look, I don't really know what else to say about his character and his portrayal of Michael, other than the fact that he absolutely killed it in this season. I talked about this before, that the hype between the crossover between Coven and Murder House was kind of a letdown for longtime fans. While it was awesome for people like me to see the Coven witches again, I feel like they dropped the ball for the vast majority of the season in focusing on the characters that we remembered from Murder House. And I know a lot of people have come at me in the comments and said that while that might be true, we did get to focus a lot on Michael, and based around the story of the season, we know that Michael was a character primarily from the first season. But Cody Fern didn't play the Michael that we remembered from the season, nor was Michael that big of a presence besides the storyline of the pregnancy in order to make him a standout character from Murder House. But even with all of that being said, and the fact that they had to take a vast majority of season 8 to explain who Michael was and how he was brought up in this world and figured out that he had to start the apocalypse, Cody Fern absolutely killed the part, playing it with a sense of grace and malevolence that ultimately made him one of, if not the most evil antagonist that the series has ever seen. And that's why it makes it so far up this list. Number 5, James March, played by Evan Peters in American Horror Story Hotel, Season 5. As we get into the top 5 of this list, one of the things that you're going to start seeing is I absolutely love murderous, conniving characters. And if you can portray them with a sense of grace and type of class that only the mega rich can portray, then I love them even more. There's a reason I absolutely love Brian Fuller's Hannibal series. And arguably nobody portrayed that type of character as well as Evan Peters did in the 5th season of the television show. American Horror Story Hotel's retelling of the first serial killer known to the United States in H.H. Holmes, and his creation of an entire hotel based around the concept of murdering and hiding people's bodies allowed for one of the most interesting theme locations in the entire series. And it's immediately clear that Evan Peters just absolutely loved the role, stealing every single scene that he's in and just absolutely eating up the scenery. If there's one reason you need to watch American Horror Story Hotel and you haven't already, it's quite honestly just to watch the character of James March. Number 4, Dandy Mott, played by Finn Whitrock in American Horror Story Freak Show, Season 4. Speaking of crazed, murderous characters, while I've made it very clear that I'm not a fan of Freak Show, Dandy is one of the best characters that the series has ever produced. A spoiled, rotten, rich kid so fed up with his wealth and luxury and being given every single thing that he wanted since his childhood leads him down a very dark and disturbing path. And Finn Whitrock plays the character to perfection. Like I just said with James March and Hotel, if there's a reason that you must watch Freak Show if you haven't already, it is quite simply only for Dandy's character, in my opinion. And look, I'm sure that's going to piss off a lot of people in the comments, but I'm going to stand by that all day. Number 3, Kai Anderson, played by Evan Peters in American Horror Story Cult, Season 7. Just like I said with Allie, if there's one reason that Cult was such a memorable season, it's simply because of the characters that were put into it. There's a lot to be said about Evan Peters' portrayal of Kai Anderson, and that his process into that character led him down a disturbing path that ultimately ended up with him playing a much more diminished role in Season 8, and even stepped away from the series in Season 9, and at this point we're not even sure if he's going to be coming back for Season 10 or beyond. But at least for me, having an opportunity to follow a character like Kai in Season 7, and getting at least the faintest hint, even though quite exaggerated, of a real-life online troll mentality that grows up into a charismatic and magnetic cult leader is something kind of crazy to behold. So while it's really clear that Evan Peters has played a lot of amazing roles throughout American Horror Story, I would just have to go on the record and say by far this is his best one. Number 2, Sister Mary Eunice, played by Lily Rabe in American Horror Story Asylum and American Horror Story Freak Show, Season 2 and 4. It seems like everything I said about Sister Jude earlier on in this list is echoed through Sister Mary Eunice's story throughout Asylum, but the complete opposite. As a character that starts off as one of the most innocent and well-meaning people in the first part of the season, ends up becoming the main antagonist going forward. And if there's one lingering criticism that you might have about Asylum in general, is that by the time she's gone, the whole season starts to at least fall apart. It's a main issue with American Horror Story throughout every single season, but the loss of one of the best antagonists in the entire series really did hurt the story that they were trying to tell. Also, as I said with Jessica Lange and her portrayal from Murder House to Asylum, this is the season and the character that made me start paying attention to Lily Rabe as an actress. It's a powerful and provocative role that helps elevate the entire season into something truly incredible. And if Lana and Sister Jude are the pilot and co-pilot respectively, then Sister Mary Eunice is the hellstorm that they're trying to make it safely through. For me, there is an absolute reason why 3 characters from one season make it onto this list, and it's simply because the interactions between all 3 of them and the individual portrayals of all 3 actresses really help make that somewhat of a very special season. But honestly, if it wasn't for the number 1 pick on this list, then Sister Mary Eunice would definitely be the best antagonist in any season of American Horror Story. But as is always the case, there's a better one. Number 1, Fiona Goode, played by Jessica Lange in American Horror Story Coven, Season 3. She is, without a doubt, the absolute pinnacle of any character in American Horror Story, and I feel like one of the reasons, at least myself, if not everybody else, absolutely adores Coven. Seeing this story play out as Jessica Lange brings Fiona Goode's character to life as she's desperately clinging on to her once unfathomable power, even though it's slowly being taken away from her. It's the type of arc that transcends the dark magic engulfing the story of Coven and really hits a human level. As everybody gets older, we start to lose what made us young and what we thought defined us. And for so many people out there, instead of finding something else to live for or finding a talent in something else, so many people react to that by seeking out their youth instead of looking towards their future, because that maybe even the mere thought of that shows them that they're one step closer to death. Not only is this the best role that Jessica Lange ever played in American Horror Story, but it's downright the best character throughout the entire series. And I'd be willing to argue that amongst anyone who wants to go down to the comment section below. Anyway, guys, that's my list. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Make sure to go down and share yours in the comment section below. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload. It's been real.